Good job there. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority Administration and Budget Committee to order at 5:31. Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Chapman,
Present.
Director Sutherland,
Yes, here.
Director Dominguez.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum?
We do.
At this time, any members of the public will have the opportunity to address the committee on any item not on the agenda. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Do you have any speakers?
I don't have an agenda. Did I miss? I apologize.
Oh, no, I think you just want to speak to us.
No, I just wanted to get an agenda.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry.
You're off the hook.
There are none.
No speakers, thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 2025 ABC meeting. Do I have a motion? And Carolyn, can you speak to this a little bit, please?
Yes, so there was a question whether or not the current members of the ABC could vote to approve the minutes from November 13th, 2025, because 2 of the committee members are new starting this year, and our more tenured committee member was absent that day. We consulted legal counsel. Legal counsel said, indeed, the committee can still vote to approve the minutes.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So I'd like to, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Director Chapman.
Second.
Thank you, Director Dominguez. Does the committee have any questions? Are there any members of the public who wish to comment?
There are none.
Thank you. Please call the vote.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Sutherland,
Yes,
Director Dominguez.
Yes.
that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we are now on to committee business, and our agenda item is to receive an overview of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority finances, and we have Justina joining us this evening.
And if I could, through the chair,
Yes.
I'm just gonna introduce the item, which is you guys getting all set up.
Please.
So committee meeting directors, I'm Ray Rusher, Assistant General Manager. And tonight, as you said, we have Justine as Senior Fiscal Services Officer, presenting an open space authority finances 101, if you will. With the intention of grounding the committee on the authority's financial vocabulary, concepts, and processes in preparation for receiving a draft budget at your May meeting, your next meeting. Elizabeth Loretto, Administrative Operations Officer, and I are here to support Justina's presentation and to answer questions, but it's Justina's show, and so I will turn it over to her.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee. Good evening, directors. So tonight I'll be providing that overview of our finances. Some of the topics we may have covered either during onboarding, in monthly or quarterly or annual reports. So hopefully this refresher would also just kind of set us up, as Lee has mentioned, for a smooth review of the upcoming budget as well. So we'll kick it off. Let's begin with a summary of the different revenues that we received, and as well as the different funds that the authority draws money from to pay for our expenditures. District 1 is a benefit assessment that is renewed each year by the board. And it brings in approximately 4.2 million, and it's used to cover expenses such as salaries, non-discretionary expenses, election costs for the directors, mitigation services that we perform for other agencies, capital purchases, as well as acquisitions. And then for Measure T, which was the successor to Measure Q, that is a parcel tax. It brings in 8 million, approximately 8 million each fiscal year, and it can pay for expenditures that are outlined in the expenditure plan. And they're namely in 4 categories. So if you hear expenditure plan category or EPC 1, 2, 3, or 4, EPC 1 relates to protection of natural and working lands. So expenses related to acquisition project, agricultural work, those are all eligible for Measure T funding. EPC 2 is any type of projects and costs related to protecting water resources. So any watershed work, any restoration along creeks, rivers. And then EPC 3, one of our biggest category, it covers stewardship as well as environmental education expenses. So any type of operating and maintaining our current preserves, opening any new preserves, any type of capital improvements, those are all covered and eligible for EPC 3 Measure T funding. And then the last category, EPC 4, is related to our urban grant program. So then any type of Measure T funds that are allocated toward the grant program that gets dispersed are eligible. And then our third fund is actually it splits into an operational and a capital reserve. The unrestricted reserve fund was created following the resolution of a settlement over District 2. In 2013, the board approved the reserve fund policy. It committed for the operational reserve fund, it committed 14 million to serve as kind of a rainy day operational reserve. The remaining balance left at the time was then considered the capital reserve. It could be used to pay for capital improvements as well as acquisitions. And then in 2017, the board updated the policy to create an additional fund within it, setting aside a total of $300,000 for conservation stewardship purposes. And that was aligned with best practices under the Land Trust Alliance. Sorry, thank you. And then the last fund that we manage is the grants fund. This is a restricted fund. It's money set aside that we received for specific projects from grantors. And we have strict guidelines on how we can spend the money and for what purpose. And so we manage that through, and it's used for specific projects. I'm gonna take a quick pause there, see if there's any questions regarding the different funds that we manage. As it relates to the budget that the board will receive and review, those would be very similar to the different columns on the budget sheet that kind of itemizes where money is coming from each fund and which fund is paying for what.
Justina, would you
Mhm.
mind just telling the board members what the current balance is in the operational reserve and where those monies are?
Yes, I have a summary slide of the carryover balances of each of the fund. I could go to that slide to share that number real quick, or if okay. Seeing no questions, I'll proceed. So then the budget and work plan document acts as a guiding document for staff to record and track the expenses for the approved programmatic work and projects funded by our revenues, District 1 and Measure T, as well as the leveraged outside funding, which is the grants. And basically to ensure that we have a fiscally responsible and productive work plan in place at the beginning of each fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th of each year. We start our development process for the budget and work plan almost 10 months prior, somewhere around like August, September. And there's going to, typically our purpose or the process is we start with a publicly held workshop with our management and strategy team, as well as executive leadership team and board. And then the workshop includes discussing priorities, reviewing the various financial models. And then we start kicking off the process in October with staff. And that is where we publish a schedule of milestones, the deliverables that staff has to submit. We publish all the forms and documents that staff would use and need to propose next year's budget. And it goes through multiple reiterations over the next like 3 to 4 months. With the executive leadership team approving a final version of the proposed budget and work plan numbers sometime in late March. And then from there, kind of the month of April is when the fiscal service officer, AKA me, start to compile the report with the final numbers. And then start preparing with MST, the management and strategy team, the presentation for ABC in May, as well as the board in June. And the meeting in June is a public hearing. And we present the work plan projects. We also present the numbers, the budget in that. And so that is typically the length of our process. It starts almost a year in ahead, looking forward to what we will be doing next year. So in anticipation for this coming June's budget and work plan, we started that back in August of last year. So just kind of getting a sense of the length of time there. The resulting document comprises of 3 parts when you receive in about 3 months time, 2 months time-ish. It includes a budget. It includes a summary of the work plan project and milestones, as well as the programmatic work that staff engages in. And then it also has the appendices, which includes the actual Excel-looking Word document that has a very detailed breakdown of the budget. It also includes the salary pay plan. So that is what the board can expect to receive in June. And throughout the fiscal year, staff publishes and presents to the board and the public. We have quarterly financial updates to check against the budget that was approved on how we are tracking our spending. We also provide monthly check registers of the payments and bills that we are paying. We also, at the end of the fiscal year, present and publish a status report for all MQ and MT revenues and expenditures, as well as we have a independent financial audit. So the whole year's worth of time, we work on our budget, and then throughout the year, we are holding ourselves accountable and tracking and presenting how we are doing against the approved budget that the board reviewed.
Christina, just a quick
Yes,
question.
of course.
For clarification purposes, the work plan development cycle encompasses the 4 funding streams?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so all the different types of financial reports that the board, is aware of and may have seen throughout your tenure on the board, all with the intent of providing transparency to the expenditures recorded. So, and accountability of what staff is recording by reporting project progress. So in these documents, oh,
Can I
yes,
go back?
yeah, of course,
Very simple question.
yes.
On your second slide, District 1
Yes.
is benefit assessment and Measure T is a parcel tax.
Mhm.
Are they listed as such on our tax bills or are they broken out that way?
So on our property tax bill, I believe they just show up in the special assessments box.
Okay. Yeah.
So they don't get shown separately as one's a benefit assessment and the other is a parcel tax. Yes, but they are 2 separate line items.
Oh,
I just looked at
my property tax
Yeah.
thought that.
Yes. Yeah, so homeowners would see one line would be $12 because that's District 1 is $12 per parcel. Then there's gonna be a separate line for Measure T, and that would be $24 per for the parcel.
And
Oh,
I wish council were here because he could explain this a lot better. So obviously the benefit assessment goes back to 1996. And it only goes to the property owners of record. And so the Open Space Authority did its own targeted election for those property owners within the jurisdiction. And there's a formula of the benefit to each parcel. So in some ways, it looks like a formula that you might be used to seeing on a general obligation bond, you know?
Okay.
3 cents per $100 assessed value. It's something more like that, but it's to the parcel, not to the value of the property. A parcel tax is a flat amount per parcel. So there's not a formula for it. So I might ask Bill, when we report out on this meeting later on tonight, I can have Bill give a little bit more information
This is
about
the
that.
first time I'm noticing that they're different words, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Yeah.
It's they're still focused on the parcel,
Okay,
but the benefit assessment is formulaic, whereas the parcel tax is a set flat amount for each parcel.
okay.
And the benefit assessment, I don't know if Bill will talk about this some more, did not cover the entirety of the OSA's jurisdiction. So it did not cover agricultural parcels, and it did not cover anything east of the first ridge, the Coyote Ridge. So all those lands that go from the Coyote Ridge all the way to the Stanislaus County line, a lot of open land in there, right? None of that is included in the benefit assessment. Okay. And then the other thing, you're probably aware there was litigation over the benefit assessment. And partly what that was about is that with a benefit assessment, you have to demonstrate the benefit to each kind of parcel. And the gist of the lawsuit at the time was, how can, if you have to show a special, it's called a special benefit, how can you demonstrate a special benefit if it applies to the, such a large area, to almost the entirety of your jurisdiction? And that was the nature of the lawsuit at the time. So anyway, that was the first and last time that the OSA pursued a benefit assessment. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and on the accounting side, the difference I know is the benefit assessment needs to be renewed each year by the board. The Measure T does not. Mhm. On my end that I am aware of, yes.
Kind of on that, Justina, could I ask you to remind the ABC the process for renewing that assessment now that we're diving into it?
Sure, I
Right.
can, yeah, I can go. So
It
last,
happens kind of with not a lot of fanfare, so just want to make sure they know what it is.
so actually on tonight's agenda, we will have a direction from the board to engage with a engineering consultant to prepare an engineer's report. And what the engineers do is similar to what Andrea's mentioned, taking the tax roll from the assessor's office and then levying a tax on each of the parcels that's eligible within our jurisdiction. So they would then provide to the agency a preliminary report, which is almost like a rough draft that staff would take to the board to review. And then the board will then give direction to hold a public hearing to then approve the final engineer's report in June to levy that tax in preparation for fiscal year 26-27. So that's kind of like to the board, a 3-step process. Direct the preparation of it, review the preliminary, and then direct hold the hearing, and then in June hold the actual hearing to receive questions or public comment about the levy. Mhm. Yeah, of course. Okay. So going back to the budget document, besides the three parts that you'll see within the budget, oftentimes the expenses are rolled up and presented to the board and to the public by major expense categories. So I wanted to kind of go over the components of that so that it's easier to read when the budget comes along. The budget document provides that full detailed breakdown by fund, by GL accounts, and all those accounts roll up into this list. The first major expense category is payroll benefits, payroll and benefits. It includes any expenditures related to salaries, stipends, payroll taxes, medical benefits, include dental and health. For all full-time, part-time, temporary staff, board members, includes also our unfunded liability for our retirement pensions as well. So all those type of expenses are captured in that payroll and benefits category in the budget. The next category is the travel and expenses. Those include any type of mileage reimbursements to staff, any type of travel-related expenditures like airfare, tolls, parking fees, public transportation for offsite partner meetings, professional conferences, trainings. And those expenses would get captured in that category. Third one is supplies and consumables. That is all includes any type of short-term consumables that are goods and supplies purchased for like one-time use, limited consumption, limited lifespan, might be office and kitchen supplies, postage, printing. A bulk of it is also captured as field-related operations, related supplies, such as safety supplies, tools, small tools, fuel, as well as nuts and bolts, kind of like the any type of materials for fencing, for signage, for vegetation management, for fire management. Those are all captured in that category. Another big category we have is the outside services or the consultancy. Those typically includes expenditures related to professional services that are under contract. It may include IT support services, legal is in there, recruiting services, a lot of media and communication related, such as design and content, community relations, as well as then more of the planning and conservation type of consultancy, whereas there's any type of resource management, conservation planning, even acquisition related services like getting an appraisal, getting a environmental phase 1, as well as CEQA. All those type of special professional services are all captured in that big category. The other next one is the other services and expenses. This is more of a catch for miscellaneous fees and other expenses. They include business insurance, perhaps payroll processing fees, bank fees, wire fees, permitting fees. The collectors, the Santa Clara County's assessor's office collector's fee is also the 1%. So when revenue comes in, the assessor collects it, they take 1% off the top and we receive the 99% net. And so that fee is also included in this category. So this is kind of our fee. And then the next one is the equipment and maintenance that you'll see on the budget. You'll see expenses that are related to the procurement and maintenance of the tools, field equipment. It might be hand tool equipment used for whipping, or it might be even like vehicle type of maintenance to prolong the life of our assets. They may also include expenses for computer equipment as well. So as well as software subscriptions. So all those type of expenses are captured in that category. The next one is facilities and utilities. the board would see expenses related to the operations and maintenance of our properties, which includes landscaping services, janitorial, utilities such as water, sewage, electricity. All those types of expenses would be found in that section. The next one would be memberships and sponsorships. They include memberships and subscriptions paid to professional organizations that are offering workforce development, training, educational materials that staff uses, even perhaps some that might be certifications like our landscape architecture. Expenses also includes professional sponsorships to support partners, conservation partners, and organizations in line with our mission and goals. The last expense related category would be the acquisitions. So any type of fee title and easement, it would capture the cost of acquiring those titles. And then the last one is not quite an expense. And I will have another slide that will talk about it more in detail, but it's actually an allocation. The authority grant program line that the board will see on the budget, that is actually money that you will be setting aside to kind of, into the urban grant program pot for future solicitation. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's money that we are awarding out or dispersing out. In the budget, that line is the allocation that you're setting aside. So those are our major expense categories. It gets rolled up, it gets reported in the quarterly financial updates, as well as it's also rolled up into groups for the financial audit. So you also see those in there, as well as it is shown throughout the status report for Measure Q and Measure T. It follows the same categories to present our expenses. Any questions before I move on?
Justina, could I just ask,
Mhm.
because Director Chapman sits on LAFCO,
Yes.
we pay dues to LAFCO. We receive that every year from them. Does that end up under other services?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep. Another, it's included in there.
okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay. So kind of another way that we have also represented to the public, because sometimes accounting can be a little dry. I know the numbers, I know, I like the numbers, but I know, sometimes. So then there's also graphics that we show throughout. I know this has been published on our website. It's been shown on other presentations as well. But what's more digestible or relatable to the public is these categories. So they might not necessarily align exactly to our major expense categories or like how our general ledger chart of accounts might be in the accounting world, but these are more of like where our work, like where the money goes toward our work. So we've been kind of using this to show and demonstrate where Measure Q and Measure T money is going towards, and not exactly to IT support services or, some other type of category on our general ledger account.
Justina, just to refresh my mind, so staff time allocated specific projects are kind of divided up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, that's why kind of in our budget, all the staff that budget is in the payroll and benefits
Right.
category. But to actually represent, but where is the work going towards, this donut graphic is kind of what is.
Usually when you see most agencies budget, biggest expense is
Yes.
staffing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this one is very small, I'm like, that's right, please sprinkle it throughout.
Yes, yeah.
And is that just because this is a reflection of just Measure T and Q funds?
So this donut graphic, yes, this one was made for just Measure Q and Measure T, and it ran from 2015 to 2024, these numbers specifically, the percentages breakdown. There was a historical look.
To see a donut for all four funding measures. But just coin your term of the graph.
Got it.
The board might remember, Megan Drager worked closely with Justina on this to really pour over our expenditures and where the money goes, because the public often wants to know how we're spending the funds. So when we go out and do educational presentations, and that's the other reason we put this on our website, it's a lot easier to say 35% of your funds, local tax funds, go toward land protection. 27% go toward taking care of the land, stewarding them. 14% go to building trail facilities. 10% go to urban grant program, and only 3% goes to the administration and governance. And that's really important because I think a lot of people assume that a government agency spends, you know, the lion's share of its money on overhead, as people think of it as, and it's important to show. And then I don't know if Justina's gonna take it to the next level here, but we have followed this, what we call the donut graphic, with another slide that shows the leverage capability. So for every dollar of local tax funds, we bring in $3 from outside funding. And that, it just tells a really good story of how efficient the agency is. Did I steal your thunder?
No, and I was saving that thunder for the budget hearing. That's
You'll hear it again.
yes, that slide will be at the budget hearing. Not quite in this one. Okay, thank you, Andrea. So yes, of course.
We will give you an opportunity to.
I was waiting patiently.
Okay.
I had a
Raise
question.
your hand.
Yeah, I was just saying for later, let me know. Okay,
Thank you.
no,
Okay. So another component of the budget is the board's approval of an administrative allowance. And that's an amount that Measure T funds could be used to pay for expenses in support of Measure T projects, but aren't directly tied to the project. In the expenditure plan, the language itself, Measure T funding is meant for projects and programs meeting the objectives of those expenditure plan categories, those EPCs, like the 4 that I had mentioned previously. And then other expenses not directly tied to the project or program's costs are considered administrative in the expenditure plan and are subject to that allowance cap that is set by the board. But these administrative, quote unquote, expenses are not what we normally think of, like office supplies or business insurance, but they're more like hard costs. Oops, what did they're more like hard costs and staff time that's associated with supporting our agency's mission, the projects itself, and the programs. For example, staff time managing the urban grant program, reviewing the reimbursements requests. Those are not a project. And so they are subject to, be put into that administrative allowance bucket. Perhaps another example is the software licenses for that grant management software or our ArcGIS software. And field supplies and consumables that are used across the agency and aren't, specifically allocated to a preserve. Like we may not be using an equipment that we bought at that preserve. It's just used throughout. Staff time spent conducting research for grants, the actual grant writing. That is the work that's done ahead of time before a project's even perhaps available. It's just looking for outside funding, preparing the status report, attending the board and committee meetings in support of getting approvals for contracts and funds for the projects. So all that is under the expenditure plan is considered administrative, but they're all in support of the work. Without that, we can't really do the Measure T projects. But what happens is in the budget, there will be a section, as well as it'll be in the resolution, for the board to approve that allowance cap. And staff would make a recommendation, and then a board can review and approve.
Could I just say it another way? Because there's specific language in the voter approved measure, Measure Q, and then its successor, Measure T, that says, tell us all the expenditures that you've done as we define it in the measure as administrative allowance. That's not how we typically track what's a project, what's a program, what's administrative overhead, right? We just talked about that a minute ago where it was 3% in the donut. So we'll revisit this when we bring the budget to you, but we don't want you to look at this administrative allowance and say, oh my gosh, you're spending 25% on administration. That's not how we are looking at this, but we have to provide that to be compliant with the measure language.
And then finally, another major component of the budget is another amount that the board reviews as well as approve each year is the allocation amount for the urban grant program. As part of the budget each year, the board approves an annual allocation. That is the money that's set aside to put into the urban grant program pot, let's just say. Typically, so that's the allocation. We kind of build up each year with the allocation. It typically takes about 2 to 3 years of that annual allocation to build up enough money to offer a solicitation. So that's like the second step. So that is the grant cycle that the grants making team, which we just had one in March, the special meeting. And then from there, once the grants are awarded, they may be what the grants could run from a year, it could run multiple years, but then the grantee then requests reimbursements over a period of time that the grant agreement allows as a project progresses. So then in our books, each year we set the money aside. When we offer the solicitation, we encumber those funds. And from those, every time we disperse the reimbursements to the grantees, it draws down from that encumbrance. And so we track it. There's also checks and balances where the grant team is tracking it through their grant management. Accounting is also tracking it through our accounting software. So we have checks and balances on making sure the balances check out at end of each fiscal year. But that is an amount, the allocation is the amount that the board approves. When it comes to time to solicitation, the board approves the awards. Typically, the disbursement is just when it comes, and then the report out is in the quarterlies of how much we've been dispersing. The quarterly has a summary of the grant balances, how much is still left off for each grantee. So there's still a report out, but there's no approval for the disbursement part. Staff just processes, and that's kind of the general process for the urban grant program. Any questions on that one? Yeah, of course.
Could you explain there's one other part of the grant flow, and that is there's the allocation that the board approves it annually, but can you explain, darn it, I just lost the word in my mind, before or when there's a solicitation, the board also says, this is how much we wish to award or we're designating for this particular round. And then there are awards. So there's if I recall, there's an item, a subcommittee, right, that usually makes a recommendation for that.
So because that process is typically with the grants team, I believe that is their process. Sorry,
That's okay.
yeah, I don't want to speak to it because I'm part of the allocation part. And when the awards are finished, they tell me how much to encumber and then the disbursement. So, but yeah. I do know they do ask me how much is in that pot. So yes.
Right, so we're checking the balance
Yes.
of the fund.
Mhm.
We're, offering the board what that amount is, you're designating how much you think you will be awarding, you've got a number in mind. And then I just want to clarify one statement. I think Justina, you were saying that when it comes time to reimburse grantees, there's no approval, and you meant from the board. There is
Yes.
external approval. I just want to assure
Sorry.
you that
Yes.
we're reviewing those requests for disbursements at that time, but that's done at the
Yes.
staff level.
Yes. Thank you, Lee. That is a correct clarification. It is approved through Acumatica, our accounting system, so it goes through that process. Okay, so then now, let's see. So finally, in June, when the staff presents the budget, kind of connecting the very beginning of this presentation, we bring in about 4.2 from District 1, 8 million from Measure T, so about 12 million in revenues. Our budget might be more than the total expense budget might be more than 12. So it's like, how is that possible? Well, one is we augment our revenues with outside funding. We also augment it with carryover. So outside funding can come from partners, local agencies, state, federal, and even private donors. So through the grants. The other one is using carryover. And carryover is unspent revenues that were accumulated from previous fiscal years. So then I wanted to kind of go over the balances, explain the committed amounts. In District 1, as of our last audited financials, our current June 30th, 2025 carryover balance is a little under 9 million, 8.9. Based on the 4.2 million that we were expect to receive by the end of this fiscal year, as well as what we have approved as a budget, we have a projected June 30th, 2026 ending balance of about 6.9. Now, there is a committed balance, the encumbrance, of about 2 million. That 2 million is actually the encumbered balance for our 20% funding program. And that is a grant program that was written in our 5-year plan that has to do, that's funded by District 1. And that is also a formulaic calculation. And it is that committed amount is the sum of, I believe, 5 different cities or counties. And they get their allocation based on the concentration of parcels, like how big that area is. So then what is projected for the agency's use for operations and capital purchases would be about 4.9 is the projected by the end of this fiscal year, moving into the new fiscal year with incoming revenues plus the projected carryover of 4.9. And then for Measure T, 14.2 as of last fiscal year, projected to be about 13.9 by the end of this fiscal year. Then we have an encumbered balance of the Urban Grant Program balance of 1.1. The bulk of it comes from what we just awarded earlier this month. So that money that we are now have awarded out, we have to set aside for our grantees. So what's available for our use is a little under 13 million, the 12.8 million. And then Measure Q, do we have any? Oh, and in Measure Q, for Measure Q, we are drawing down. There is no replenishment. There is no incoming funds for Measure Q anymore. It's been replaced by Measure T. In Measure Q, we had a 10.4 million. We project to spend about 2 million this fiscal year, so it'll draw down to a balance of about 8.2. And there is still some money left over. There are still some grantees still drawing down from the Urban Grant Program awards that were funded through Measure Q. So in previous cycles, grant cycle, they're still drawing down. But as the committee can see, that number is drawing lower over time. So that we will have a projected available carryover about 7.7 million by the end of this fiscal year. In reserve, we have 17.5 million. This is reserve also does not have incoming revenues. However, it is invested. We get interest income. So there is a projected ending balance of 17.6. We have, through the reserve fund policy, committed and set aside the 14 million operational reserve, as well as the 300,000 conservation stewardship. So what is actually available to spend and use is about 3.3. And then lastly, the grants one, that is money that we have received from grant towards that we're holding cash in our bank accounts that we have also is just available to draw down on the specific projects. So while it's available, it is restricted to available for which project based on the grants that balances.
Justina, can I just
Mhm.
make a comment about the reserve?
Yes.
So I think it was, you said 2013, the board. This was in the wake of the settlement of the lawsuits over
Mhm.
District 1. There were 30 some odd $million that was remaining to the Open Space Authority. And the board at that time made a decision to set aside $14 million into an operational reserve. Those are unrestricted funds. And the board could decide to do something with those funds other than having them be a rainy day fund. But they have now been invested, as Justina said, and the corpus has grown, which is really good to see. So while, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Justina, while it has grown by 3.3 million, the totality of it is unrestricted reserve fund that the board oversees. And so, depending on what happens in the next couple of months, the board may want to take a look at that and decide, do we leave it as it is invested? Do we combine other funds with it for the future? But it's important monies to know that it's a cushion for the Open Space Authority, and it's a peace of mind for the agency right now, until we know kind of what the future holds. So I don't want to give the impression that you cannot do anything with the 14.3 and you've got 3.3 million to spend. You have 17,653 of which all of it, except for maybe the 300,000 that was set aside as a stewardship fund.
Correct.
Stewardship legal fund
Mhm.
is unrestricted funds for the board to look at.
Thank you. And Director Chapman has a question.
Yes.
So how often do we dip into reserves, or do we not normally do that?
We try not to.
Have
When
we-
we no,
Never.
we have for the tenant improvements for this building. We have for the measure when we went out for measure T. So we have dipped, but it's in terms of ordinary business, no.
But access, in theory, you rarely access. these funds.
Yes.
And if I could just clarify too, and that 14.3 million is by policy,
Mhm.
right? So the board designated that, so of course, policy could be revisited, and that as Justina was explaining, that's why it's committed, it's set aside for the rainy day. Yes, I just wanted to
Mhm.
explain that there's policy.
Yes. So what Andrea said is also correct in terms of if the board were to, pass or amend the policy, that number, what's in our bank account is a 17.6. Or sorry, 17.5 for sure. The projected is depending on in 3 months' time how much interest we earn by then.
And Justina, how was the 14 million determined? How did you get to that?
That number was determined before my time, but the intent was that it was at the time, it was approximately 2 years of operating expenses
Okay.
at the time. Yeah.
And do you know? At that time, it was a much smaller organization.
Yes.
What time would that cover now?
It would probably be about 12 to 15 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to point out, and had this discussion with staff the other day, is, as the board is aware, you put a measure on the June 2nd ballot, Measure D, And though we don't have the final number yet, you know, we have been told by the county based on past experience that we could expect to pay the county something like $3 million reimbursement for having placed that measure on the ballot. Right. So to me, that's a question, depending on the results in June 2nd. Because you always pay the county in arrears. Where should that funding come from? Do you want to take it from unrestricted funds? Or do you want to look at another source of that? So those are the kind of things that really important financial questions that I think the board has to take a look at in the coming months.
So almost, sorry, one more. Okay. So then something to keep in mind why carryover is important is, with the exception of some private donors and acquisition grants that go directly, to escrow, most grants that we receive are reimbursement based. So we would have to pay out of our pockets first, which means cash flow becomes a factor. Especially for larger projects, we have to fund it first and then get reimbursed. So there's a timing gap to think about. Another thing is that we receive our revenues in 2 tranches. We receive them in January and June of each fiscal year. So when the fiscal year starts in July, any checks we sign, any salaries we pay, the bills, the lights, those are being fulfilled using funds that are in carryover. Because in July through around, so whenever we recommend a budget, we look at forecast scenarios to ensure that we're balancing delivering on the work, the goal, the priorities, but also leave enough of a healthy carryover balance to make sure that we could pay the bills from July to January, get our first tranche, and then, because that's where we get it from the assessor's office, and then continue the fiscal year, and then we get our second tranche in June. And so it kind of circles again. So we, without carryover, we would be operating with no cash from July to January, because we don't get our cash until January. So just something to also know, or at least I wanted to inform the committee that staff looks at the carryover and make sure that we do maintain and we don't just draw down completely, kind of thing.
I have another wonky question.
Yeah.
By the way, I love the way you explain this because I'm getting into the at the time. So with the new county assessor and the revamping of the system, which hopefully will make things better, do you anticipate that we might be capturing more income from reassessments?
That part I will have to look into. I might have to ask our engineering firm who helps us levy their submittals to see if the timing would improve. And even if there's more streamlined, will the assessor's office change their disbursement schedule?
Yeah, I'm curious about that, but again, if they're supposed to be going to a computer system instead of,
Mhm.
paper and pen, I'm hoping that might be advantageous to us.
Yeah, I have to look into that. I'm not sure about the outcome.
Go ahead, Director.
I mean, and then we'll have to wrap it up because we do have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah. It should be a 2-hour meeting.
I need a chair then.
I just need just a little bit more clarification on this chart, because I'm trying to not bring my nonprofit brain into this budget overview. When you are carrying over this revenue, you're also carrying over project expenditures as well, correct? Because you have that committed, or is that under the committed work?
No, the committed ones are only our grant funding, grant programs. At this current point in time, there are only a select few projects that we're actually
Okay.
considering carrier. But then for the most part, it's more of they use it or lose it. They have to request it again each fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the one exception maybe with that is with a project like CV
Correct.
Camp,
Yeah,
which has really big outside consulting services numbers. And Nick may have projected he was gonna get a lot more done in the current fiscal year and it doesn't happen, so it's gotta happen next fiscal year. And we need those funds the next fiscal year. So we can't assume, oh, we've got extra funds lying around that weren't spent that can go to something else. They have to be,
Mhm.
we have to be on top of that to know that has to go to Coyote Valley Master Planning.
But yeah, any other questions?
I don't think they're from ABC. However, I do know that we have, hold on, let me make sure I can physically right for it. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the item? John C. Reynolds,
Okay, up here,
Sure, yes.
thank you for joining us. Yeah.
I have 3 questions. 2 of them, I believe I can just send you an email and it would probably be more appropriate. But I was curious about, with all the things that are going on, what happens if you have some monies that are specifically for a project or buying a certain piece of land or doing whatever, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't get spent or not all of it gets spent for the purpose it was done. When you decide, oh, okay, well, we'll take that money and spend it somewhere else, you go through a process of acknowledging, is it through the budget process like this that you redirect funds that were for? Is that true?
Partially, so kind of what Andrea was alluding to, and I mentioned certain projects like CV Camp, we are tracking to make sure we have a committed amount, or at least a good buffer to make sure it carries over throughout multiple years. We did that same thing with Mayan Oyakma, the public access, making sure we can't just start building it and not have funds to pay for to complete it. Other projects, however, it's again a little bit closer to a use it or lose it model where it sweeps back into the general carryover. And then the project manager will have to request it again in subsequent
Okay.
budget years.
And offline, could I get your email if I have questions about things? Cool, thank you.
question answered.
And Justina, I hope, were you able to get everything you needed out of us?
Yes, yes.
Great. And with that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting at 6:28.
Thank you.
Thank you. We get to